I would have taken a bullet for him. He was not just my boss, he was my friend. The only issue is I wouldn't take a bullet if he was the one pulling the trigger. And that's exactly what he did.
I got to tell you, you are the most Shakespearean character, at least in the paradigm of if Shakespeare was writing about characters. You were Donald Trump's fixer. You said at one point you'd take a bullet for him. Now you call him a con man. You've obviously spent some time in the pokey. You're a convicted felon, like the president. When you reflect upon your life to date, what are some of the things that stand out? And what are you comfortable about? And what still makes you angry?
It's a multifaceted question. First and foremost, I was not joking when I said that I would have taken a bullet for him. I would have taken a bullet for him. He was not just my boss, he was my friend. The only issue is I wouldn't take a bullet if he was the one pulling the trigger. And that's exactly what he did. And why he listened to whoever it was. Now, according to my book, Revenge, which is, it was the number 6 New York Times bestseller, but it was how Donald Trump weaponized the United States Department of Justice against his critics. There were a slew of people who were around Trump who thought that the only way for Trump to get past all of the Russia situation was to basically cut me off, throw me under the bus. You don't throw the guy under the bus who is your protector. What you do is you throw your arms around them and you shield them, you protect them. But for whatever the reason is, the person who controls Trump's ear last controls the brain.
This came out of the Robert Mueller investigation around Russia,
So
correct?
What happened is the Mueller investigation led the FBI to absolutely nowhere. And they weren't done with Trump yet. They needed, for whatever their reasons were, political or not, they needed to get Trump. And so the only person at the time that was within Trump's orbit, they weren't going to get Trump. You weren't going to get the president of the United States. So they figured they were going to get the guy who was closest to him, right? The 11 allegations that were raised against me by the Steele dossier, that garbage document, were all inaccurate. Andrew Weissman turned over that file to the Southern District of New York, Jeffrey Berman, and that's where the story starts.
You said you weren't indicted, but obviously they were charging documents because you pled, right? At some point.
I pled. There was an information, not a charging document.
So is Trump right with the Russian hoax? Like all of this at that particular time, right? They never found any sort of evidence of a Russian collusion with the Trump campaign or Donald Trump personally. Was he right about that?
Yeah. Well, to the extent that I have knowledge on, there was no Russian compromat. There were no phone calls and conversations other than the ones that I testified to. Yes, I called the Kremlin. There's a great story, by the way, Charlie, right? I did call the Kremlin. They asked me, what did you call the Kremlin for? I said, well, I called because at the time, Barack Obama and Putin were feuding, and Putin said that he was not going to see Obama when he was in town for the United Nations General Assembly, and or Obama wasn't going to invite Putin to the White House. So Trump turns around and says, I wonder if he'll come here, have a Mar-a-Lago burger with me downstairs at the grill. I said, I don't know, let's find out. That would be something, wouldn't it? Talk about a great publicity stunt. 2 powerful leaders getting together at Trump Tower. So they said to me, really? So where did you get the number to the Kremlin? I'm sure that was the question you were going to ask me. How do you happen to have the number to the Kremlin? It's called Google. I literally Googled, what is the phone number to the Kremlin? And lo and behold, I called it. I have a request. I'm calling from the office of Donald J. Trump, the Trump Organization. And I speak just enough Russian that I was able to get that conversation out there.
And so just for context, when was this call that you called? When did you Google search, and then how quickly did you call? And
2016 was during the campaign.
When does it go off the rails with your friend? At what point are you thinking, I think he's cutting me dry
Well,
here.
the last time I spoke with Trump was the day after the raid. It's like April 10th. And I couldn't understand that. Why was nobody reaching out? Then I'm watching on television a couple days thereafter, or a day or so thereafter, and he's sitting at a table, arms folded, the whole Trump look. And he says, it was just disgusting that they raided one of my attorneys' homes, law offices, and so on. He goes, it's just disgusting what they did. And I'm saying to myself, whoa, whoa, whoa. One of my attorneys? Now all of a sudden, I don't even have a first name. I'm the guy that he called every single day for over a decade at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. I was the last phone call at night between 11 and 11:30, 7 days a week. Now all of a sudden, I don't have a name. It's disgusting what they did. When I was first requested by SIPC, the Senate Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, I did not want to testify. So then they subpoenaed me. Trump got extremely angry. Why are you letting them subpoena you? It looks bad. It's a big story. It's a big story. He cared more about the press on it than he cared about what the ultimate results could be. And I begged him, just shut the shit down, right? Shut it down. You're the president of the United States. Nothing good is going to come out of this thing. And he said, I want you to testify. Well, when I went in and I testified and I gave truthful answers, except, of course, to the 1001 violation that I got, which was lying to Congress, lying to the Senate Permanent Select Committee. Charlie, do you know what that lie was that they charged me with? No? Ready for this one? They got me with 1001 violation based upon my response to the number of times that I claimed to have spoken to Trump about the failed Trump Tower Moscow real estate project. In the response, because Trump wanted, as always, stay on message, de minimis, use the number 3. The true answer was 10. That's what they got me on.
Now, you pled guilty around that, right? And you've indicated that you did that because of pressure that they were indicating they would indict your wife or bring charges against your wife. But did you ever balance that with, Trump's my friend, he's going to give me a pardon because I am doing his work and I'm trying to help him? Did that ever cross your mind?
Never thought about it that way. Once I had started the testimony, like with SIPC, immediately thereafter, I was subpoenaed by HPSI, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And then as soon as that one finished, I ended up testifying before the Senate Judiciary. I mean, it didn't stop. You know, people remember the one House Oversight Committee hearing that I did before rest in peace, a good man, Elijah Cummings. I actually testified before Congress 7 times, 9 hours a clip. All right. In fact, the day that you all saw me live on television, the day before and the day after, I also testified before different agencies. Once I started testifying and once documentation was put forth, game was over.
Anthony Scaramucci, who was on the show as well, had indicated that people in his orbit just are going to be blown up at some point. Like, you obviously was, in your own words, his fixer, making things go away or helping him. You obviously saw what he asked you to do and how you did it to others. Were you surprised that this was happening to you? Because it sounds like it's just a playbook that occurs consistently with Donald J.
I wrote
Trump.
about it. It's actually the very first paragraph of my book, in Revenge, in Disloyal, which was the #1 New York Times bestseller. I never thought that it would happen to me. I was the guy who threw people under the bus. I'm not the guy who you throw under the bus. I never thought it would happen to me. And that's a common error that we see across the board. Rudy Giuliani is another great example. Never thought Trump would throw him under the bus. And the funny thing is, you listen to the press, and the press will say, you know, Rudy and Trump, they're friends. They go back a long way. They were never friends. There was never a close relationship between Rudy and Donald, ever. Donald needed Rudy, for whether it was free legal shit or what have you. Rudy needed Donald because Giuliani Partners was faltering and he needed a connection into the White House so he could sell himself. And it was basically supposed to be a mutual benefit. Well, it didn't turn out that way, because in order to stay in Trump's orbit, Rudy actually did things that he obviously should not have done, made up all sorts of crazy conspiracy theories and stories, like what he did to Ruby Freeman and Shy Moss about the thumb drive, which was really like a Werther's candy. And there was no reason for it. And now look at Rudy. At one time, America's mayor. Today, fast forward, 2025, he's the laughing stock of the world with that nonsense running down the side of his head at the Four Seasons landscaping parking lot.
Does Donald J. Trump have friends? Is that part of his sort of gestalt? Like, are there people who have been longstanding friends that he gets together with and has no agenda other than just pure, unadulterated
So there
friendship?
are people that he will sit down and have dinner with. Does that mean that there's a friendship? They pick up the phone, they'll go hang out someplace. That's not Donald. It never was. Not even when he was younger. In fact, I happen to know the guy who was his roommate at University of Pennsylvania. And he was like, he never wanted to hang out. He never wanted to go out with us. He never wanted to do anything. And, then he came back to the city. He ultimately went into the real estate world. And the answer is no. I mean, I can honestly say, and let me tell you how close I was to Trump. We were so close that actually our outlook, meaning our contacts from our phone, were synced to one another. So I had every one of his contacts in my cell phone. And you may say, that's a weird thing. Like, why? Because we were together so often. He would turn around and he would yell at, to me, hey, Michael, get me Charlie Stone on the phone. He wasn't going to give me his phone. He doesn't like people touching his phone. He happens to be a germaphobe. That is true.
When you went to prison, how often did you think about what went wrong? And what did you sort of mull about when you were spending time in prison?
How about every single second of every single day? You turn around and you're like, how? Why? Right? The stupidity. I never should have been charged. I ultimately got a 6-year sentence, 3 years of incarceration, 3 years of supervised release. For what? For an NDA? Because I didn't want the world to find out. He didn't want the world to find out about the relationship with Stormy Daniels? Seriously? The only reason that NDA ultimately became a legal issue is because he won the presidency. Funny, if you think about it, as I watch television now and I see the things that Trump does, there's no doubt in my mind, Trump of then and Trump of now are two totally different Trumps. He would have shut this thing down 1, 2, 3, the same way he's doing things right now. And what's interesting is how he's doing it. He's actually using folks like Pam Bondi. He's using folks like, whether it's Kash Patel or Elon Musk, to do things, to do the bidding.
When you talk about Elon Musk, is he going to have this similar day that you had? Is there a time when Elon's going to go, what just happened?
The answer is an emphatic yes. Again, let me just give you another example of a situation, let's just say somewhat similar. Not identical, but relatively similar. Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, built up $1 billion business in pillows, and now he's filed for bankruptcy. Where is Trump today as it relates to Mike Lindell? Where is Mike Lindell today in terms of this administration? He's nowhere to be found. And I suspect it's not just going to be Elon Musk. I suspect it's going to be an entire group of them, very similar to like what happened in the first administration, because Donald truly cares about one person and one person only. It's Donald J. Trump.
And so what advice would you give to people working in the White House? Like they're let's assume they're in service to the country, trying to do the right thing. How do they survive?
Well, I think they are all very self-motivated, which I get. Just be self-motivated and not at the expense of our veterans, not at the expense of our elderly, not at the expense of children who have learning disabilities. That's not okay. All right. None of that is okay. My advice to them, Look at history. You know, there's an old adage that history repeats itself. History repeats itself, especially in this world of Trumpism. We saw it with the tariffs from the first administration. We saw it with individuals that were within his orbit. That's what I suspect you're going to see a lot of. The next 2 years for Trump and the folks that are inside is going to be very ugly. And I don't want it, Charlie, can I say one last thing here? I don't want to see Trump or this administration fail. And people say to me, how could you say something like that? I do not. I don't agree with his policies. I am fundamentally opposed to many of the things that they are doing, like the way ICE is running around, going into hospitals and schools and houses of worship and arresting people, like not providing proper information. I'm not okay with any of that. But he is the president of the United States, and I respect the office of the presidency. All right? My only concern, all right, is that the people that are around him are so devoid of process and how the government is supposed to work. That's what really scares me even more than a president that causes chaos every single day as soon as he wakes up.
The bones, the marrow of our Constitution seem to be holding, albeit questionable how long. But we do have a next round of congressional elections, to your point, 2026. We have justices that are holding the line on what they, according to Article 3, feel is their constitutional authority. Do you think we're going to hold here? Is this union going to make it?
You know, we're on life support is probably the best way that I can describe it. Like, for example, Judge Boasberg, whose decision and order is being completely ignored by this administration. It was Trump who turned around and said that on day one, he wants to, metaphorically speaking, rewrite the Constitution, that he wants to strip the legislative branch and the judiciary of their co-equal powers under the tripartite system of government and confer all power to the executive branch. It's why he is only legislating right now via executive order. It's easy for him. Doesn't have to go through the process.
Well, we all learned around 8th grade that checks and balances, right? We're not sure what the cause, but there is checks and balances between Article 1, Article 2, or 3. And then we have the people, right? We still vote. And the economy is not doing great. And I think to your point, 2026 will be very interesting to watch.
Yeah. Well, Charlie, let me say this. Another very famous quote by Vladimir Putin that Trump memorized and he liked very, very much. It doesn't matter who you vote for. All that matters is who's counting the vote.
What is his fascination with Putin? You obviously have known him a long time. Why does he have this fascination with Vladimir Putin?
Because of the power that he wields in the country of Russia. The fact that nothing takes place in Russia unless it comes across Putin's desk. No building in Red Square will even see the light of day unless Putin approves it. Every major company there, 25% of that company belongs to him. And that's what Trump wants. He wants that autocratic power. And with that autocratic power comes autocratic money. I assure you, everybody talks about how Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. Vladimir Putin could burn Elon Musk's money and still have more than anybody else in the world.
Is there a reformed you? Is there some sense of going through the experience? How are you different today than you were in 2016?
You know, I think I'm still the same person. I'm still protective of those people who I care about, which is what ultimately got me into trouble. The difference is what happened to me. I want you just to put yourself and have your listeners put themselves into my situation. I had 48 hours within which to plead guilty, or they were going to file an indictment that would include my wife. So I say to all of those out there, what would you do? Okay? Would you put your spouse, your significant other, through that torture? I suspect the answer is probably not. On top of that, when I was ultimately released after 13 months of incarceration, and that was after doing at the time, 35 days of solitary confinement. Literally no movement, not like what you see on Shawshank Redemption, where you're out in the yard for an hour, in a room, locked up. 3 times a week you get to shower. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, you have 5 minutes. Plain and simple. So when you ask me what's different about me today, the PTSD of the entire experience, being away from my family for 13 months, I've never been away from them for a day, other than if I was traveling with Trump or for business. But I've never gone away. I've always been there. To be in solitary confinement, locked up, no movement, 3 days go by, no food. This isn't America.
If you have a chance to talk to Donald J. Trump again, what would you say
Why?
to him?
That's all I want to know. Why? Who told you this would be a good thing for you to do? And why did you let it happen? It was unnecessary. You realize that if I never testified, he never would have been charged with any of the crimes that he ultimately was indicted on, ultimately found guilty on.